Mark, Meta said today it would stop putting fact checks on its website and instead allow community.
Well, I watched their news conference, and I thought it was a very good news conference. I think they've come a long way. Meta, Facebook. I think they've come a long way. I watched it. The man was very impressive. I watched it. Actually, I watched it on Fox. I'm not allowed to say that. Say it?
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past? With
Probably.
Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. I've got Olivia Juliana back with me today. And Olivia, I'm going to, since we're talking about disinformation today, I'm going to read from your Truth Social bio. Olivia is a Texas Democratic strategist. All opinions are my own, are your own. We need to talk about the proliferation of disinfo after an election in which the far right got everything they wanted. They got the White House, they got the Senate, they got the House of Representatives, they've captured the Supreme Court, and they can't stop whining and lying. I don't know what the question is, but commiserate with me.
Yeah, I mean, are we cooked? I've just been kind of looking around the last few weeks, and it's just like, okay. I think we all said before the election, we're going to find out what kind of a country we are. And I think we just got a very clear answer as to what kind of a country we are. And I think it's up to those of us who see this for what it is to make it clear over the next 4 years exactly what it is they're doing, whether that's a legislative agenda, whether that's judicial activism in the right-wing sphere. We just have to constantly remind people what's going on and hold them accountable to the promises that they made. Personally speaking, I am still waiting for my eggs to be $2 a dozen. So when those things start happening, I think that we can, we can hold their feet to the fire a little bit.
It never ceases to amaze me how adaptable the far right is on seemingly all important issues, like the price of eggs, which you haven't heard about in weeks because we're talking about invading Greenland and Panama now. At the same time, lives are being destroyed across California because of the wildfires, and you have the president-elect spreading the dumbest and most damaging lies about it, and his, I don't know what we refer to Elon Musk as these days, but he's at the top of the disinformation food chain. I respect you for going on Truth Social, but it does seem like an uphill battle, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it really is, and especially as it regards to these political issues that are really affecting all of us. At the same time, Los Angeles is on fire. I'm here in Houston preparing for another grid failure here in Texas because of how cold it is. And so the fact that that's even going on and we can't have a conversation about climate change without DEI being brought up, it feels so ridiculous. And I certainly understand it really feels like we're swimming against the current. But I tell people all the time, clients or nonprofits will ask, do we need to be in these spaces still? And the answer is yes. They are counting on us being beaten down and feeling defeated and just giving up and leaving these spaces so that they can continue to pump out these things to normal everyday people who are not as tuned in with politics. So, when it comes to things like Twitter, when it comes to things like TikTok as well for spreading disinformation, we just saw Mark Zuckerberg roll back content regulations on Meta platforms. It's going to be up to us. It's going to be up to people in the community to be fact checking these posts and making sure that we're spreading accurate information, at least in our circles, because they're going to be very intentionally spreading misinformation and divisive messages. And so we have to make sure that we're doing our part to tell people the truth.
When you say it's up to us to fact check, it's not just a figure of speech. It literally is up to us now because but the most serious content moderation and the institutional fact checking that we used to be able to count on from some of these social media companies, they're rolling that back. In fact, I believe it was a recent press conference with Donald Trump where he was asked, do you think Zuckerberg's dilution of the fact checking and content moderation is because of your threats against him? And Trump said, yeah, probably.
I mean, yeah, I think, let's call a spade a spade. Like, that's exactly what this is, people are afraid of what's coming. And I think it should be very, very telling that the owners of these major platforms have all but rolled over to Donald Trump, and that the mainstream media is losing their audience at extremely high numbers because people don't trust them to tell the truth, because they're afraid that Donald Trump is going to go after their certifications as reputable news outlets. Like, the fact that we're even having this conversation where the president is threatening reporters and journalists and also threatening the owners of some of the largest companies in the United States, which are also some of the largest employers in the tech industry in the United States. That is scary. That is not normal. And we should be calling it out for what it is, which is right-wing extremism. And I've already noticed this kind of, people downplaying Donald Trump or trying to soften him and make him look like this is a normal president. This is not a normal president. And we shouldn't treat him like a normal president. We should be honest about what the things he's trying to do are and about the threats that he's lobbed against people consistently over the last 8 years.
It's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break here to let you know that we'd love to hear from you. Your comments, suggestions, thoughts about future topics and guests. Email us at info@thekenharbaughshow.com and make sure to rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and back to the show. When you refer to people normalizing Trump, I assume you're not talking about his allies. You're talking now about people who used to be clear-headed and clear-eyed about the threat he posed. I'm thinking of Joe and Mika at MSNBC, who kind of started this trend of obeying in advance, to borrow the Tim Snyder quote. But you're seeing that all over the media now. And when it's coming from actual corporate executives, that should be the 5-alarm fire, not just, a Zuckerberg video in which he talks about a change in policy, but in the case of ABC News, actually a $15 million payoff for a suit they easily would have won. I'm talking about George Stephanopoulos referring to Trump's assault as a rape. You have these companies throwing money, not just paying lip service, but throwing money at Trump and in a specific instance, his inaugural fund. Apple gave $1 million. Facebook gave $1 million. Bezos gave $1 million. And this is not normal. They didn't do that for the Biden inaugural fund. It really is. It's even worse than obeying in advance. It's paying in advance.
It is. It's paying in advance. And, it's not just these companies and corporations. I feel like we're starting to see Democratic politicians do the same thing.
Tell me more.
There's a select group of politicians, I think, who are kind of walking this really fine line. And I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt right now. I'm talking about, Senator Fetterman, to be specific. And what I mean by that is I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt because it's the responsibility of the adults in the room, at this point being the Democrats in the House and in the Senate, and in these state governments. It's going to be our responsibility to find the line between resistance and obstruction, because we don't want to be a minority in the way that Republicans were a minority over the past 2-4 years, where we're blocking bills that might actually help people, or we're beating back against legislation that could actually be a good thing just because we want to be contrarian to Donald Trump. And so I think that, that conversation we really need to have internally as a party. And if I'm in Democratic leadership, I would be having this conversation too, is finding the line between resisting the worst aspects of Donald Trump's presidency and obstructing the government from functioning at all. And so I really hope that we can see some kind of cohesion or cohesive message around all of these things, and doing that soon. because we can't kind of spill my tea on me. We can't kind of figure this out as we go, because it's not just this clip might circulate around me online and that might make me look bad. It's people's livelihood and their lives and the programs that they rely on to survive are at stake. And so I really hope that we can kind of start to see that, Democrats finding that line, because from what I've seen right now, it doesn't look like it's realistic resistance. It looks like you said, paying in advance.
Well, for my part, I'm having a really hard time finding that line, because my impulse is to let them suffer the consequences of their own decisions. I'm thinking about the upcoming budget fights. I'm thinking about the CR, the continuing resolution to keep the government open. I understand the politics of doing that while Biden is still president, but when the Republicans are fully in charge, when they have the House, the Senate, and the White House, and let's stipulate the Supreme Court as well, don't you kind of feel like letting them walk the plank? And when when the next Speaker of the House, whether it's Johnson or not, comes begging to Democrats for help, letting them suffer?
I think that we should give people what they voted for. I think that we should allow people to see exactly what it looks like when Republicans govern in all branches of government. I think that that's important, is to let people see the consequences of their vote. But I think where we can, we have to govern exceptionally. And I think it's really going to be the responsibility of Democratic governors and Democratic mayors and legislative chambers to have an extremely productive 2 to 4 years. I think that we need to highlight the victories that we have in those places. I think that we need to be calling on those elected officials as leaders and representative and speakers of the party. I think, two people who have been exceptional in this facet are Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer. Josh Shapiro is not above working with Republicans. He's worked with Republicans while governor. But he's also raised education funding. He's protected abortion rights. He's, the I-95 cleanup with the money from the infrastructure bill that was given by President Biden. Like, these are examples of good governance. And we need to highlight that is what it looks like when your elected officials are doing their job. And that is what it looks like when Democratic governors and state and local officials are doing their job. Because you look at that compared to what you've seen from Republican state and local elected officials, it's night and day. I remember what it was like when we had a major natural disaster here in Texas a few years ago in 2021, and our power grid failed, and Greg Abbott was talking with the energy companies and figuring out how to charge us more and how they could recoup their losses, rather than addressing the fact that over 100 Texans died. And so now every time we have a slight breeze, all of us who had to experience that are traumatized, and we start charging battery packs and buying up all the things we can at HEB. And so, I think that we have to let them govern. We have to let them do what they're going to do, because, we don't really have much of a choice when it comes to policy in the federal government or the executive branch. But we do have a choice on how we, our leaders, legislatively, and executively in these state and local governments where we do have control. And I think that that's what we really need to be focused on the next 2 years.
Well, the key to that, to me, is something you said at the beginning, which is we have to highlight the successes. Because one of the most frustrating things for me is that Trump is about to inherit an economy that's actually doing pretty well. He's about to inherit policies that have really done a lot to strengthen American families and the American working class. He's going to take credit for all of it and deserve credit for none of it. I hear what you're saying about claiming credit at the state level with those Democratic governors and local Democratic governments. But we seem to fail perennially at the national level in granting credit to Democratic administrations where it's due.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I think this past administration, part of the trickiness of that was so many of the things that we did were not the meat and potatoes economic things that so many Americans can understand from a policy. Yeah, it was like very in-depth stuff. And I think that something that was really great that I wish we would see more of is when we started seeing President Biden put up those signs that said, like, this is from President Biden's infrastructure project. And of course, people will say, well, like, that's something that Donald Trump would do. Yeah. And Donald Trump was just the first Republican president in over 20 years to win the popular vote. And it's because he consistently takes credit for things, even things he doesn't do or he didn't do. Like when he put his name on those stimulus checks. I think it's this inclination of Democrats to kind of be polite and to govern with grace. Pardon my language, but screw that. Like, we don't need to be polite about our accomplishments anymore. We need to tell people the truth about what it is we're doing and what it is the opposition is doing. How many Republicans who voted against the infrastructure bill were at ribbon cuttings for projects that were started with money that they voted against? Like, we need to call that out for what it is, and we need to be unashamed about what it is we're doing. And a really big part of this that I don't see people talking about enough is the fact that we have incumbent Democrats in Congress who do not campaign in their districts. And there are Republicans who do the same thing, but we have incumbent Democrats who have been in seats for 5, 10, 15, 20 years who don't raise money and don't campaign in their districts because their gerrymandered is safe. And what we have as a result is we have voters in these districts of over 500,000 people who don't think that it's important because they're not seeing their representative out in their community. That is a problem that we have to rectify before we go into midterms, because if we don't, we're not going to see the gains that we could see, because we have the opportunity to do that now. And we should start setting the groundwork for that now. And that starts with holding Democrats accountable who have not been doing their part of telling people the truth about what's been going on in the Biden administration.
Amen to all of that. What are you working on these days, and how can people learn more? We'll put notes in the show notes.
You can follow me on Instagram, and you can subscribe to my Substack. I am going to continue to work on telling people the truth. I actually have some exciting announcements coming soon that I can't yet share. But other than that, if you want to subscribe to the Substack, you'll be helping pay my tuition. Awesome. So
we'll put that link down below. Olivia, as always, thanks for joining us, and stay warm.
Of course.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.